Hello or hello again, whatever the case may be. Um, Today I'm going to do a video that isn't so much about book hunting, although if you stick around to the end, uh, I will show off a few books that I've recently gotten book hunting. I decided this week to do a video that's making its rounds around BookTube. Has been actually for a few weeks. I'm kind of late to the party as usual. But several booktubers have done videos where they show off their 10 favorite covers of the books in their collection. Um, First place I saw it was Grammaticus Books. I don't know if that's where it started, but Grammaticus has a great channel. Well worth your time if you want to go take a look. I've also seen Michael K. Vaughan do it. If I'm not mistaken, Steve Donahue did it. Aaron Facer, I saw his video, and I've seen it with other channels that I wasn't as familiar with. All those channels I just mentioned are great channels. Go subscribe if you're not already. If you're into books and talking about books, they're all great places to go. Um, in any event, the bug bit me, so I scoured a little bit in my collection, and I found 10 book covers that I really appreciate. Some of them are I like a lot because of the artistic aesthetic in them. Some, I have to admit, are more about the emotion they evoke, or or my connection to that particular book or the story. Um, I think most folks who are doing this are setting a rule where they have to be actual physical books that they have on hand. Um, I think everyone did 10 different artists on or designers on 10 different books. Um, I am fudging a little bit on that. I have an artist in my stack of 10 books represented twice. Um, but it's probably he's probably one of my favorite artists from the books I was reading back when I was reading the most, back in the early 80s to the early 90s. And like I say, we'll get to him very shortly. But I did basically the same thing. Uh, I have 10 books right here. I'm going to go through them. Um, I have read all but one of them. And I do believe I need to read that one next. I've been reading more recently. I just finished reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, uh, a book I've had forever, at least 6 years. Uh, as I say, and it said in a short that I posted earlier today, I have moved 3 times in 3 years. Yeah, 3 times in the last 3 years, and I've hauled this many books plus a bunch more in each of those moves, including The Alchemist. Finally got around to reading it. Shame on me. Um, and which made me admit something that I am sure I was already aware of, and that is that I've got a ton of books that are probably great books that are just sitting on my shelf. Remember, I'm I'm repenting of being a book dragon, but I still have some of the sins. Anyway, without further ado, I want to go through these 10 books, tell you about the artist or designer who did the cover, maybe a little bit about the book. Um, First one that's on top. I love this cover. This is a trade paperback of A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles, a book that I read for book club, uh, basically because I lobbied for it early in the year. Uh, um, Basically, this cover is basically photographic in nature, but I really thought it captured the mood of the book. Gentleman in 1920s formal wear, is wearing his suit and his hat, looking out over a balcony on a black and white city. And to my mind, this really captures what the book's about. The black and white gives it a sense, in my mind, of isolation. Um, and you'll notice the guy in the balcony, who I always figured was the protagonist, Count Rostov. As you can see, uh, hands behind his back, not defending himself against the world. but he's of gentlemanly heritage, and it's a posture that you'd expect from him. Anyway, really enjoyed the book, but like I said, I thought this design really captured the mood of the book, and I have notes for some of the artists and designers that I was not as familiar with, and this is one of them. A Gentleman in Moscow. This cover was designed by Melissa Four. Like I say, and these are in no particular order, except maybe the last one. Um, the next one's the only book I own but have not read yet, as I said. And like I say, it's going to be I think I'm going to start on it probably after I finish this video. It's a book I've intended to read for a while without any further ado. It is Master and Margarita by Mikhail. Let me look at my pronunciation again, notes. By Mikhail Bulgakov. Oh, the Russian stuff, it always trips me. But anyway, in any event, I don't know much about the book except that it was written in the Soviet Union by Mr. Bulgakov, and that it had to be, as I understand, it had to be smuggled out of the Soviet Union to be published. But this cover design, and this is a Penguin Deluxe Classic, apparently the 50th anniversary of the book's publishing, 10 years ago or so. And I love the cover designs for Penguin Classic Deluxes. Black spines, they're okay. The deluxes, I think, are always beautiful. And you have this beautiful, I'm going to cover my face, beautiful wraparound art for the book. Oh, lady with a tear streaming down her cheek and a cat. And like I say, I'm not sure much else of what's going on. But like I said, this is just such an evocative cover. It had to be one that went on my list if I'm picking 10 of my favorite book covers in my collection. The next book I have is my copy of Dante's Inferno, of course, the first part of the Divine Comedy. And let's get in past the light shine. The cover art for this one is a portion of Hieronymus Bosch's famous work Hell, painted in 1504. And Hieronymus Bosch, he did art in the late 1400s and early 1500s that I don't think would come back again until the Surrealists in the 20th century. Just bizarre stuff. But I think it's certainly a fitting cover for a book about the torments of hell. And in fact, I think there ought to be a rule. If you're going to publish The Inferno, you should probably have Hieronymus Bosch on the cover, on the back cover, or at least somewhere inside. Uh, but no, just like I say, just horrific, stirring images of just torture and just suffering, and very few people could do it better. Let's put it that way. But anyway, just and to my mind, part of what makes cover good for me is how well it meshes with the book. Like I said a few minutes ago with A Gentleman in Moscow, the cover's simple, but like I say, it just fits the book so well. Once again, I want to read Master and Margarita to see if I agree after reading it. Does the cover suit the book? All right, next. Oh, one of my favorite nonfiction books. And looking through here, the only nonfiction I believe on the list. And this is get past the shine. This is The Devil in the White City, of course, by Eric Larson. A very evocative black and white image of the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. And it shows the White City illuminated by electrical lights, alternating current electrical lights provided by Westinghouse, and of course the genius Nikola Tesla. And of course, the book, the cover, like the book, demonstrates a couple things. One, the wonder of the World's Fair and the architecture that went into it. juxtaposed to the horrors that were going on uh, just outside of the fairgrounds. Don't want to spoil it. Of course, book's been around for a while. Most people know what it's about, but like I say, it's another one of those instances where I thought um, the emotion of the cover really suited what's going on inside the cover. Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. Um, Out of the covers of Eric Larson's books, um, this one is I'm thinking still my favorite. Although I really, really liked the cover of In the Garden of Beasts. Um, but like I say, this has got to be my fave. Right. Next, um, had to read this one in school. I've owned many, well, several copies, um, and have seen several more. But this is definitely my favorite cover for Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Um, Once again, I don't know how much I should care about spoilers for a 60-plus-year-old book, but I, this is certainly another one that matches the emotion that's going on inside the covers. The colors in this one, and the fire, and the young boy, facing it, just is just chilling. And I say by far my very favorite cover of Lord of the Flies I've ever seen, and one of my favorites from my collection. All right. And, oh, this next one, the art is kind of okay, but sentimentality kind of still keeps it in my top 10. This is a little novel that most folks who would ever happen to see this probably won't remember, but this is The Sleeping Dragon, written by the real Joel Rosenberg, not the guy who writes political thrillers now. But back in the 80s, oh, well, probably even going back to maybe back to the 70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah, Joel Rosenberg writing fantasy stories, science fiction stories. Wrote several stories about Jewish mercenaries on a planet that's sole export was mercenaries in the far-flung future. But this was the first book in his Guardians of the Flame series. Um, and the cover reflects characters you will meet in the first book. And spoilers, once again, spoilers for a 40-plus-year-old book. It's the story of several Dungeons and Dragons players who do not realize that their dungeon master is a real wizard from an alternate world who needs their help in getting back to his alternate world, to basically the place of his origin, and sends them through to open the way. Um, any event, that's enough because that's what you'll get if you read the first chapter or two of the book, and probably the back cover. Anyway, like I said, the cover artist for this one is a guy named Daryl K. Sweet, who did a lot of illustrating, 70s through the 90s. One time, I probably had dozens of his of books with his covers on them. And even today, I can look at a book from that era, and you can immediately tell that's Daryl K. Sweet. Uh, but in any event, like I say, nostalgia for the story probably helps with this one. The art is kind of, fairly basic composition. You know, 5 characters, including a baby dragon looking at you from the cover. But once again, for me, it still stirs a little emotion, a little nostalgia from reading in high school and college. So it's in my top 10. Oh, now we're getting into the real emotional punches. Um, this is an old Ace edition of Time Enough for Love by Robert Heinlein. Um, I had back in the late 80s a bunch of Heinlein paperbacks um, by this that had covers by the same artist. And this artist is, oh, let me refer to my notes, because although I appreciate the cover and like I say, I thought it was quite evocative, I could never remember the artist's name. Oh, here we are. James Warhola. That's right. James Warhola, who I did a little research on James Warhola. Um, I can't find any science fiction books that he illustrated other than the Heinlein covers. Mostly, it seems like what he did was children's illustration. But you had this signature series that came out in, I think, primarily in the '80s, where they reprinted a lot of Heinlein's old stuff. I bought a bunch of these signature series books, and I believe they were all illustrated by Warhola. But the thing that gets me, I'm going to zero in a little bit, is actually the subject matter of the painting on the book. In the center, the man is Lazarus Long. Lazarus Long is part of a, well, more spoilers ahead. Once again, I'm not telling you anything that you won't know if you didn't turn this book around and read the back cover. Lazarus Long was born in 1916, and he's still alive in the year 4200. He's part of a breeding program to try and increase human longevity. And uh, but even this program was not so successful that it's creating people who live millennia long. Um, we're talking about adding hundreds of years to the human lifespan, not thousands. And Lazarus Long is an exception to that. And this book starts with him after living over 4,000 years, deciding he doesn't want to live anymore. Um, and this book is a collection of his memories, of some of his adventures over those 4,000 years. And you can see in the image, Lazarus there, whose birth name is Woodrow Wilson Smith. Heinlein used to do that, like to do that. He would give characters um, um, with common last names very prominent first and middle names. Like there's Andrew Jackson Libby, too, who's one of the best friends of Lazarus Long. But anyway, there's Lazarus, surrounded by ghost-like female figures who represent the women that he's remembering and talking about in the stories that he's telling um, at the throughout the book. But yeah, this one was just once again though it goes so well with the stories that are inside, and it's a real emotional gut punch when you see that cover and read through the stories and realize exactly what it means to live and love and see everyone that you've loved die, because even if they're part of the same breeding program, for lack of a better term, that he's the product of, they're living hundreds of years and you're living thousands of years. Nothing, no person that you make an attachment to um, will be around. You're going to outlive everyone and everything. And this book explores, um, sometimes very controversial ways, what that does to a person. Um, but in any event, enough about the book itself, because we're here to talk about my favorite book covers. But that is certainly one of them. All right. Um, the next book cover is from another Robert Heinlein novel. And it's the first of two that I have from the same artist. And he is one of those 1980s artists that I really appreciated in the books that I was reading back in the day. In fact, I wish I had his the paperback edition of another Heinlein book he did called Friday, but I do not. If I did, it would be one of the photos or covers that I was showing you. But this is Robert Heinlein's Job: A Comedy of Justice. Got the main character on the cover, and like I say, I'm going to try and keep the spoilers pretty much to what you could learn by reading The Dust Jacket. Um, it is in some ways the retelling of the biblical story of Job. Um, it's a comedy of divine justice, shall we say? But yeah, it has all these elements. There he is. That's Alexander Hergenheimer, believe it or not, with his halo. And all these other elements that are pulled from elements in the book. Once again, the illustration tells you a lot about the book, even though you don't really make the connections. But as you read the book, you make those connections. For instance, there's an ice cream sundae in the middle of the illustration. Why is there an ice cream sundae there? Well, you'll find out. Why are there all these dishes? Once again, you'll find out. Um, and demons and angels. Just an extraordinary book. This book, along with one other, I won't get too deep into it because it's not about that other book. These were books I read in the mid 80s, 1984, 85, 86, 87, in that range. And these were books that I would not have wanted my parents to know that I was reading. And in a lot of ways, not because of anything particularly vulgar or the violence or whatever, but they would have challenged my family's religious worldview. I grew up in a very evangelical fundamentalist kind of household. Um, and I'd like to think that my parents probably wouldn't have cared that much. But when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, you're reading stuff that kind of critiques, your family background, and so you feel that little tingle when you're reading them, which makes it extra good, I think. But anyway, one last look at Alexander before we set him aside. But yes, this is definitely one of my favorite covers. A lot because of what the book represented to me, but also for this beautiful design. Anyway, and Whelan was good at that, and you're about to see another good example. At least I think so. All right. I also want to see when this book was actually published. I have a guess. Oh, and I would guess exactly right. This book came out when I was a senior in high school. Oh, yeah, get that shine away. It is Footfall by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle both were fairly prominent science fiction writers in the 70s who started doing collaborations together. Probably their most famous is The Mote in God's Eye. But in any event, this is another Michael Whelan cover. Okay. And this is their story. They're very, I think for the times, realistic story of an alien invasion. This thing that looks like a baby elephant, is one of the aliens, the alien species that is invading Earth to try and terraform it and basically colonize it. And just some mild spoilers. This is a scene I remember well from the book in the Midwest, probably Kansas. And as you can see, the elephant is using a mirror. They have a split. It's not really an elephant, but everybody says, yeah, the alien baby elephants, just because that's what they look like. But as you can see, it's got this prehensile trunk that splits with appendages that would obviously look like they'd be really good for manipulation. He's got his rifle in one part of the trunk, and he's holding a mirror, peek around the corner to see what's coming as he's going around the ruins of his house. Yeah, just really evocative. Oh yeah, and I was like this. He's carrying some stuff, and that's like a backpack with a doll in it. So apparently he's been pilfering and looting the ruins of some of these houses. And this is actually a wraparound cover. I'll hide for a second. But anyway, once again, really interesting cover. Once again by Whalen. And just really liked the whole vibe it gave, and was one of my favorite books that I read in that year. And in those years, I was reading a lot. I would say in 1985 when this book was published, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think I borrowed this and read this from a friend probably my freshman year in college. Like I say, it came out when I was a senior in high school, and I probably read it within the next year. But yeah, this was a book that my peer group all read, and we all talked about it, and we all had lots of opinions about it. How realistic it was, and what was going on in it. But yeah, just it was a great read, but once again, for the purposes of this video, a really cool cover. Now, my last one, let's see. The cover designers for this are Tanya Cron and Hugh Syme, or Syma. I'm pronouncing the names right. If I'm not, I apologize. Oh, I'd forgotten. This is the other. There were actually two works of nonfiction uh, in my favorite covers. This is The Masked Rider: Cycling Through Africa by Neil Peart. And for those of you who are fans of Rush, yes, is that Neil Peart. Neil Peart was the drummer and principal lyricist for the progressive rock band Rush, who, by the way, are the surviving members are reuniting for a tour next year, and I may actually get to go. Don't know. It's going to take some planning, but in any event, it's kind of a bucket list thing for me. So I hope I get to go. But if not, but Neil Peart wrote several books about more memoirs about his travel experiences. He enjoyed what he called adventure travel, and this book tells the story of a trip he took to West Africa, where he rode bicycles across West Africa, Ghana, Benin, Cameroon. I think Nigeria as well. Cycling 50 miles a day across Africa, and as you can see, there's an antique map of Africa in the background. Um, the sculpture here, the middle sculpture here in the center, kind of has an African style, but but it's like an African, like oh, what would I say? A I'm searching for the right word and can't find it. Like an African style sculpture for the rider on a somewhat modern bicycle. Um, Neil Peart, I've said this in other social media and to many, many people. Neil Peart was the celebrity whose death really, really struck me. Um, sometimes you can almost feel like you know a celebrity, even though you never met them. And I never met Neil Peart, and now I can't. He passed away in January of 2020 from brain cancer. But I had listened to so much of his music and the lyrics he did, and I'd read so many of his books and see so many of the interviews that I felt like I knew him. And I got this book for 50 cents at a library sale many years ago, and I yelped with glee when I found this. I think I startled the librarian. He goes, "Did you find a good one?" I said, "I found one of the best ones. In fact, I'm cheating you by giving you 50 cents for this book. This book I knew then it was going to be so extraordinary." But anyway, so part of the reason I really like this one is the art itself. I think it's got a really interesting design, the map and the sculpture. Fits the book, lets you know what the book's about. Just a great illustration, for the book. But, for me, more importantly, it's about Neil Peart. Um, One of the greatest drummers of this or any other century, actually the 20th or 21st centuries, when he was active. Uh, but just a great book about his experiences and the insights he gives to it. Um, Meeting the people of West Africa, having impromptu drumming sessions with the locals who live there. Um, Having great discussions with the other people on the tour. That was interesting too. But in any event, my last, and like I say, I think honestly, more about the author and the contents than the art, although I love the art, but more about that, making it one of my favorite covers than maybe the art itself. I think if you just had this image on any other book, it probably wouldn't be in my top 10. In any event, that's the last one. And if you hung around for this long, since I've been prattling on for about half an hour, the book hunting bit. Um, and this is a little hint. Don't tell anyone. But in any of my videos, obviously I've been trying to get away and eliminate double stacked books on my shelves. But these two shelves are going to be an exception to that. Have been, have been historically double spaced or double shelved, and will continue to be so. But books that I gather in my book hunting week to week that I want to take to the Hatter Bookshop, I put on these shelves. So if you look at that shelf and this shelf, those are the books that I will take on my next oh book haul trip to the Hatter Bookshop. Um, Oftentimes, if I find something really interesting that I know they have an immediate need for, I'll go some other time. Generally speaking, once a week, I will anything that's not like that kind of urgent, I will I will bring to the Brattle. Um, the Brattle. Oh gosh, I thought I was Steve Donahue for a minute. Forgive me. To the Hatter. Steve Donahue has an unfair advantage in life. He has perhaps the best used bookstore in the world. I only have the second best. But in any event, if you want to glance there, um, and as I always say, give the staff about a week after this video drops, because by then they should have it and be in the midst of processing it, cleaning it, inventorying it, and pricing it. Um, Maybe 2 weeks. They've told me that. Tell people 2 weeks. But in any event, those are books that are headed for there. So that's the book hunting portion of the video. Um, and with that, I think I will say goodbye. And in fact, right now, good night. Um, I hope everyone stays well, and I hope you have good book hunting. Thanks for watching.